you created for the first time figure 4 using the definition of overburdened community that was available at that time, it became obvious that virtually the entire populated portion of the county be considered overburdened, correct?
This map provided context for the decision making happening as part of the testimony.
It wasn't context. There was actually a rule being proposed.
Asked and answered objection.
Overruled. Go ahead, clarify.
It wasn't context. This is actually depicting, and this was part of your testimony, that absent a revision, this would have been, in fact, is what the petitioners asked the board to consider the overburdened community in Bernalillo County, correct?
I can't speak to the entirety of the rulemaking process. What I can say is that this data is showing what I saw in the version where we were, where overburdened communities were identified as having 2 or more environmental risk factors above the 50th percentile and 2 or more health indicators above the 50th percentile.
And then were you asked to try to adjust the definitional terms of the overburdened community definition to come up with a map that didn't cover all of the populated portion of Bernalillo County?
No, I was not.
How did the change in the definition of overburdened community between this version, which is figure 4, and the versions in figure in the maps related to versions 5 and 6 occur, if you know?
So if we could pull up figure 8, I just wanted to clarify an earlier point when I believe I misspoke when I said that it was only the census tracts that were colored in black that were going to be identified as overburdened communities under the revision, and it's actually all those colored in orange, purple, and black. So I just want to clarify that.
So the black, so looking at figure 8, the black is basically areas where either of the alternatives would both apply, would each apply, correct?
Correct.
And then the red is still considered overburdened, but that is under the environmental and age and low income test, if you will.
Yes.
And then the small bit of purple that's left, that would be the portion of the environmental and health criteria that is not already covered by the black, essentially.
Right.
Do you know if anybody lives in that purple area?
I can't speak to that. We didn't analyze population, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay. And what is the scale on this map?
I'm not sure about distance. It covers the county.
But you understand the proposed application of the rule is for a facility that is within 1 mile of an overburdened community, correct?
My understanding is that the risk assessment analysis looks within a mile.
So I'm going to ask you the same question. Well, let me just be precise then. Let's look at
I don't recall the specifics of where the 1 mile radius was included in the rule.
no, I was going to ask you how someone, for example, this board, if they wanted to understand what additional area in Bernalillo County would be covered by the rule without a scale, how they could understand where the 1 mile radius would be.
So this map was designed to show which census block groups would meet the criteria that we've been talking about. So it was not designed to look at what those metrics look like within a 1 mile radius of all the facilities.
Where would you go to get a scale for this map that you created?
I'm not sure I follow yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, well, you know what a scale on a map is.
Correct.
Where would you go? So you're presenting a map. If I wanted to say that 1 mile is represented by a quarter of an inch, a tenth of an inch, a half of an inch, where would you go to be able to provide me a scale for the map that you're proposing?
A scale was not shown on this map because that was not the intention of this map, to show spatial distance.
So basically, and this is the only map that I've seen, if you can correct me, this is the only map that I've seen that depicts on a map, the overburdened community definition.
Objection, the witness wouldn't know what Mr. Domenici has seen.
Sustained.
This is well, let me rephrase that. This is the only map in the NOI, the universe of NOIs filed by the petitioner and people working with the petitioner that would depict where the overburdened community exists in Bernalillo County.
I did not review the entire number of documents submitted as part of the NOI.
So you can't point to any other map that would contain a scale that or depict the 1 mile radius that is described in the rule, correct?
I can speak to my own testimony.
Okay, well, I get to ask the question. So my question was, you can't point to a map that would allow this board to know.
Objection, asked and answered.
I think it was asked and answered, Mr. Domenici.
I don't think it was answered. It wasn't answered.
I thought she said she was not aware of anything further, but go ahead and clarify.
No, I am not aware of any additional maps. I can speak to the content of my testimony.
Now, is there a way, to your knowledge, if we could turn back to figure 4, please. So if we assumed that this, and this was presented at one point in time, correct, by the petitioners. This map was their definition, depicted their definition of overburdened community.
Yes.
So just looking at this, and so if someone thought, gosh, if we use 2 factors, more or less the whole population of the county is overburdened. Why don't we just focus on air toxics, cancer risk, and hazard risk, and not try to identify neighborhoods, but just develop an air toxic and hazard program for the county? Are you familiar with how that would be done?
So I think that in other states, something more broad brushstroke is done in terms of looking at doing hazard risk assessments. I think part of the intention and what the science says is that there's disparities in air pollution sources. And so here we are trying to identify and take a closer look at the census block groups that can have higher environmental burdens. And so that, to my understanding, was the intention of this rulemaking, to to help with some of those disparities as opposed to doing something more across the board.
But if this map were used, it would show virtually everyone suffers the same disparity. Using those criteria, virtually the entire populated portion of the county suffers that disparity.
A large portion, yes.
And therefore, if you said, let's just set aside the disparity issue because it pretty much covers the whole county, there is a simple way to do an air toxic screen. I think it's pretty much set forth in the rule, and to do a hazard index without having to do any environmental justice analysis. You would agree with that, wouldn't you?
I do think it could be health protective to require a health risk assessment for the entire county.
But I didn't ask if it was health protective. I asked if it could be done through a standard technique that would apply to all permits as opposed to having to do an environmental justice rule.
Yes, you can do a health risk assessment across the board for all polluting facilities.
And Dr. Clark, would you agree with that?
Yes, there is a way to do that.
Do you know if the state of New Mexico does that for permits outside of Bernalillo County?
I'm not sure.
Do you know if the permitting program for the Bernalillo County does that?
I'm not aware of it.
Did you check to see if it is already, if a air toxic or hazard index analysis is already done in Bernalillo County?
Objection asked and answered.
I asked about the state.
Go
I'm
ahead.
asking about the county.
Go ahead.
So my review of part 41, I don't remember the specific risk threshold in there.
At any time, did you suggest, particularly after seeing the data in figure 4, that perhaps pursuing a standardized air toxic cancer risk and air toxic hazard index might be appropriate for Bernalillo County as opposed to going through the environmental justice analysis?
I have always suggested both tracks along the way because the importance in this was considering not only what the health risk was, but also the additional social determinants for a particular area. If we just simply use the health risk methodology, then we'd have to, it wouldn't carry the same public health impacts as looking at the EJ evaluation.
But you proposed, so were you aware of what figure 4 was likely to demonstrate before you saw Ms. Billsback's or Dr. Billsback's maps?
I saw her maps after she produced the report,
Okay.
so I can't speculate what I was thinking ahead of time.
Well, ahead of time, there was a definition of overburdened community.
Correct.
And that definition, you helped create that definition.
Yes.
And that was intended to address what you just indicated.
Yes.
And then once you saw the map, if you know, how was the decision made not to use the criteria that were in revision 4 or Rev 4?
I don't recall.
Is it more protective or less protective to go from 2 criteria to 1 criteria as the definition of overburdened?
I would find that less protective. I think if you add more criteria into the evaluation, then you've got a more holistic approach to view public health. If you are using only 2 metrics along the way, you're only considering part of the picture. We must remember in public health, there are the things that we can measure very easily, and then there are the additional factors which always have to be considered. So these economic determinations, these social factors do play a part in the public health.
But you understand from version 4 to version 5 to version 6, the area of the county covered by overburden definition has shrunk.
I understand. We've refined it along the way.
But that's the part you said you don't recall participating in that?
I look at the maps, I can see that it's being refined.
Well, I understand that, but you've advised throughout this process, I'm just trying to make sure.
Objection asked and answered.
Go ahead.
I'm just trying to make sure that as we got to version 5 and version 6, you weren't the one who adjusted the criteria for overburdened community.
No, I was not.
Okay, thank you. And I think this was pointed out earlier, your analysis in your written testimony addressed version or figure 4 and the definition of overburdened community in version 4, correct?
Correct.
Now, let me just go to the,
Hold on just a moment, Mr. Domenici. I think Dr.
Oh,
Clark
yeah,
needs
let's-
a
yeah.
3-minute break.
okay.
Okay.
I'll do
Okay.
just a longer break.
We'll take a 15-minute break.
Thank you.
Ready?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Well, I don't, sorry to be a slave driver. And I had all right, if we can get settled, please.
How about this? How about this?
I understand that these two witnesses need to leave by 5 o'clock, so we'll make as much headway until that time, and then we'll pick up with you first thing tomorrow morning.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and maybe Mr. Domenici, are you almost done with the examination of these two?
I'm almost done with Dr. Billsback.
Okay.
But I'm planning to go through the rule with Dr. Clark. There's quite a few questions.
Okay, I'm not sure if your microphone's working or not.
Testing.
Yeah, it is. Just
So
speak a
I
little
can certainly
closer.
finish Dr. Billsback, my question.
Sure.
Just a few questions left for you, Dr. Billsback. I'm going to put what we've called version 5 of the rule, which for the record, that's docket 180, exhibit 5. And I'm going to ask that we turn to the definition of overburdened community, which is on page 8. Actually starts on the bottom of page 7, please. So let's make sure we have that. So that definition, it's BB, overburdened community. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And is that the definition if you want to take a minute and look, is that the definition you use to create figure 8?
Can you scroll down so I can see? I believe that's the definition, yes.
Okay, and so on that, if you could, I know it's on 2 pages, if you don't mind scrolling back. On that, the change is shown in, I'm going to call it green line, if you will. So were you involved in the change to include a federally recognized tribe, nation, or pueblo in that definition?
I was not involved in the decision making. I made figures related to this updated version of overburdened community.
Okay. And then in subpart 1, there's a strikeout of 2 or what would have been 2 or more environmental risk factors to 1. You see that?
Yes.
Were you involved in that change other than depicting it on the map?
No.
Are you aware of any basis, any health or risk basis to change that from 2 to 1?
So my understanding is that the way this is now written is that an environmental risk factor now is always included in the definition of an overburdened community, whereas before it was 2 or more environmental risk factors or 2 or more health factors. And so the rewrite was always to include an environmental risk factor.
Just 1, though.
Correct.
Why was it just 1? as opposed to 2?
I would be speculating about that since I wasn't involved in the decision.
Are you aware of any systematic analytical reason why it was changed from 2 to 1?
Asked and answered.
Sustained.
Let's turn to the next page. So it looks like subpart 2 was added to meet, indicating it meets one or more of the population vulnerability criteria. Are you aware of any systematic or analytical reason why that was added?
Asked and answered. Dr. Billsback testified that she wasn't involved in the decision-making process.
That is your response?
Yes, I can speak to why, from a scientific basis, you might include that information. That would be helpful.
Did you provide that information as part of this rule change? Or are you basically determining that now as we're testifying?
As I said before, I was not part of the decision-making process on what to include.
Okay. Now, did you perform any review of the denial criteria in the regulation?
I don't recall the denial criteria.
You've indicated, I think, that EJ screen is appropriate as a screening analysis. Is that correct?
I think a better way to phrase it is that EJ screen provides scientifically sound information and has been peer reviewed. And in the absence of more refined data that's been collected at the county level, that's a solid basis for understanding cumulative impacts or considering factors that might be brought into the definition.
Then I think you indicated that the use of 50% in the screening analysis, if I understood your testimony, was acceptable because it was not a part of the denial criteria.
What I said, to be more clear, was that the 50th percentile is reasonable to be inclusive in the definition of an overburdened community because it's being used to screen which communities would be taking a closer look at for this rulemaking.
But I think you indicated you compared it to other states and said that, if I recall, that the 50% was used as screening, but was not a determination percentage used in other states. Is that correct? Is that a fair characterization?
Can you repeat the question?
I'm trying to summarize your testimony, so correct me if I'm wrong. I think you indicated that the use of 50% in the screening analysis was appropriate at a screening level, but but I thought you were indicating that the use of 50% as a permit denial criteria was not used in other states. Is that a fair characterization?
I think what I said was that using the 50th percentile in order to be inclusive in terms of what to take a closer look at would be, I guess I'm not fully following your summary of my
No, that's fine.
testimony.
Screening or taking a closer look at are kind of interchangeable. I think.
Correct.
But did you then have occasion to look at the denial criteria to see if it used 50%?
I believe I looked at it, but I don't recall the context at this time.
And you're not offering any opinions as to whether or not the use of 50% or median is appropriate in the denial criteria in this regulation, correct?
I'm not offering an opinion, no.
I don't know if this helps with travel arrangements or anything, but I don't have any further questions for Dr. Billsback.
How long is your questioning for Dr. Clark?
That's probably an hour.
Okay. I think just to not stress them out, I'll excuse them at this time. You can pick up tomorrow morning with Dr. Clark.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the consideration.
Thank you.
Mr. Paseniak, I believe you got two witnesses on Zoom. Is that Dr. Johnston and Dr. Unseld?
Judge Sanchez, with your permission, this is what Mr. Jantz was referring to before, that Dr. Johnson and Dr. Unseld both have evening scheduling limitations, children and time zone. So we've asked to put on Dr. Sofia Martinez and Mr. Manuel Criollo right now.
That's fine. Right. Are they both here present? I guess they can step forward to the hot seats. Dr. Martinez, Dr. Criollo, if you can raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding? And I didn't hear you. Okay. And pull the microphone close to you and press that green button. The button on the right. There you go.
It wasn't green.
Pull it towards you.
All right, yes, I will tell the truth.
Yes.
Ms. Caulfield.
Can you hear me now? Okay,
Better.
thank you. Rahika Wright Caulfield on behalf of UNM Legal Clinic under the supervision of Gabe Pasiniak. I'll begin with Dr. Martinez, if that's
That's
all
fine.
right. Dr. Martinez, my co-counsel gave an in-depth overview of your education and job experience. Do you have anything to add to that overview?
No, it's all on record.
And is it
Excuse
fair-
me, can we get the docket number?
Oh, that was the opening statements.
Okay, but it's still a docket number, right?
182. Thank you. To continue, so would it be fair to say that you're an expert in the field of environmental justice and organizing?
Yes,
And in that field, do you mind summarizing your work dealing with environmental justice in the community?
I've been involved in environmental justice for many years, probably over 30 years. We began our work with the Southwest Organizing Project and with the Southwest Network for Environmental and Economic Justice. I've also done work with the Concerned Citizens of Wagon Mountain and Mora County.
About this.
All right.
Just-
The Southwest Organizing Project and the Southwest Network for
Environmental and Economic Justice.
You can pull the whole thing towards you. There you go.
And I'm also president of the Concerned Citizens of Wagon Mountain and Mora County. With the Southwest Network, I was also an educator. I'm retired from public school as a public school educator. I was doing radio work, and so I basically did several documentaries on the First People of Color Leadership Summit, documenting the summit itself and documenting some of the environmental racism cases that were presented there.
And Dr. Martinez, why does improving air quality in Albuquerque matter to you?
It matters because I lived in the Mountain View community for probably over 30 years. While I was there, we were evacuated twice. I had to go pick up my kids and my mother at Rio Grande High School, where I later taught. I was also there when it was discovered a baby had been brought into the neighborhood by the parents to visit the grandparents, and they fixed a bottle of formula for the baby, and he almost died from methylglobinaemia, which is blue baby syndrome. So in babies, especially, it basically hinders the oxygen and the blood level for babies, and it's very detrimental to babies. I myself was, my last child is the same age as that child that had come into the neighborhood, so I don't feel very good about the fact that he was probably acclimated from the dirty water that we were drinking in Mountain View at the time. And he never had those issues. He does have blood clots now in his arteries. Can't say that that was from the nitrates, but what I can say is that in something like the 1960s, they found a well in the Mountain View Elementary School that had something like 700 liters of nitrogen per liter, right? And the state level, and actually the US level, is 10 milligrams per liter. So then when that baby was found with blue baby syndrome, we basically began organizing in the community. We organized the Mountain View Advisory Committee. We had discussions with Sandia Labs, Kirtland Air Force Base, and the city. As a result of that, city water was taken to the community, as well as septic tanks. There's some folks that are still not plugged into the water because they couldn't, or the sewer because they couldn't afford basically connecting to that. The Valle del Oro National Urban Wildlife Refuge, which was created under the Obama administration in 2012. We have been active in that, creating an environmental and economic justice strategic plan so that they could be aware of the community that was hosting them, which was an environmental racist community. And we've developed that program over the last 8 years. So we've basically helped in browning the refuge. We have an environmental justice library there. And we basically have very good relations with the Friends of the Valle del Oro, and there's a lot of environmental justice activities that they basically host there.
Slow down just a bit. Our court reporter's having a hard time keeping up with you.
Okay, so as a result of that, and again, when we talk about cumulative impacts, we're just talking about air right now. But in Mountain View, you have groundwater that's been poisoned. You have soil that's been poisoned. Right now, there's 2 active Superfund sites in the Mountain View San Jose community. There's just a variety of, you can get on our website actually and do a virtual tour of all the different polluted sites in the Mountain View community. There's over 30 of the 36 EPA regulated sites are located there. There's probably over 30 auto parts, wrecking yard store, used cars there. There was one of the largest poultry farms there. It's now closed. There was a dog food company there that is now closed. But we continue with a lot of the problems in that community. The nitrate contamination plume, or the nitrate contamination plume, which is an underground plume of contaminated water, right? That basically, I think it was in 2019 that they finally stopped correcting it. It's still only at 100 milligrams per liter in terms of contamination. They justify it not being cleaned up based on the fact that we now have municipal water and sewer systems. However, I would like to say that it's very interesting when we talk about government research and independent research. When you look at the research that's come out of the University of New Mexico, a lot of the nitrate plumes was basically attributed to trace weapons nitrates coming down the Tijeras Arroyo from Sandia Labs and right in front of the Mountain View Elementary School, where the first nitrates were discovered. When you look at the research from NMED or other sources, basically, they want to blame the nitrates on farming and fertilizing plants in the area. But the reality is they continue to basically not deal with the fact that their word trace weapons nitrates. Trace Well, basically nitrates from weapons development.
So Dr. Martinez, if you want to take a sip of water while I ask the next question. You've mentioned a lot of pollution in your community. Could you specify what are the impacts of air pollution that you have personally felt?
Well, basically, most recently was that plastics fire that we had in the South Valley. Again, the city was very lax in informing people and getting information out to folks. I myself has asthma. I'm from northern New Mexico and never have had asthma, not asthma, allergies, I'm sorry. But I have severe allergies to dust. So whenever I pass through all that gravel industry that's going on near San Felipe Elementary, I'm really concerned about the school there. I think those kids will probably have allergies, asthma, and other respiratory problems. Many people in Mountain View have allergies, asthma, and other respiratory types of challenges.
And so in that same vein, how, in your opinion, does the proposed rule, well, let me backtrack. Have you seen the proposed rule here today?
Yes.
And what has been in your involvement with the proposed rule?
I can't really say of every little aspect of it, although I have been involved in it from the first iteration to probably the last iteration. Probably I'm less familiar with the latest iterations. I have most of my input came in with notice. As we all know, probably notice is a very poor thing when it comes to community participation. Typically, you have to put one notice in the facility that's asking for a permit and in 3 other places. So if one thinks of that living in the city of Albuquerque, what 4 places could you possibly go to and know that something is going to be happening in your community, right? Even in Wagamon, where we want to case a solid waste landfill case on this issue. The landfill was 5 miles from the community. They put a notice there. They did put one in the post office and who knows where else. But 4 notices is all they have to put up. So I did make sure that we had tribal consultation and that in addition to just sending a letter to the governors, that one would be sent to the environment department of this Estado Pueblo, as they're a small nation. And I felt that it was important for more than one office to be notified about facility permits.
So then with that being said, in your opinion, how does that proposed rule mitigate long-term impacts of air pollution in your community?
Well, again, the longer you're exposed to anything, well, of course, you're going to get asthmas, and basically, depending on what it is, if it's ozone in the long run, you can get cancers, right? So, you know, those, to me, that's real important. I work with the Tularosa Downwinders Association, and again, going back to government, we were never told, I mean, we're always told that Pajarito Mesa was isolated and remote. However, there were plenty of indigenous and Chicano people living there at the time. Eminent domain was used to get them off their property, and they were not adequately compensated for their livestock or their property. And at the Trinity site, again, it was remote and isolated. And basically, this country has basically neglected the fact that probably the highest powered nuclear bomb was tested there, and there are at least 5 generations of cancers. The parents have died of cancers, the grandparents died of cancers. Tina Cordova, who is one of the directors of the Tularosa Downwinders herself, is in remission. And most recently, a 23-year-old relative of theirs was found with cancer as well.
Hearing officer, I need to object to the testimony at this time. The testimony is not being responsive to any of the questions being posed by legal counsel. She's been proffered as a technical expert, and she's going into matters such as the Trinity site and a variety of other water issues. So I'd ask that the testimony be narrowed to the questions being posed.
Yes,
If I may, Dr. Martinez is being proffered as both an expert in environmental justice organizing, but also as a lay witness to her personal experiences.
that's fine, but Dr. Martinez, if you can just listen to the question and direct your answer to the question, not go beyond that, please.
So to the next question, Dr. Martinez, why did you originally then move to the Mountain View community?
Actually, I would move there because I was recently divorced. I was a single mom, and my parents had gotten elderly, and they had bought some property in the Mountain View community, which is probably some of the cheapest property in those days, which probably over 30 years ago. So I moved there so that I could have support from my parents. And I also ended up getting an FHA home there. I had been offered one in the North Valley, but again, as most people that are not of rich backgrounds, it was more important for me to raise my kids in a healthy environment with my parents helping me to take care of them.
And just to reiterate, do you currently live in the Mountain View community?
No, about 14 years ago, we moved out of the Mountain View community. We live in just across the river in the South Valley, and we wanted to do some farming, so we purchased a property there that had some land to do farming.
And to kind of keep going, have you ever seen state action being taken to help the quality of life in that Mountain View community?
Rarely, unless we asked and organized for it. As I said, with the nitrate contamination, a baby almost had to die, and we had to organize to get the city to put in municipal water there, as well as sewer systems. Septic tanks basically were how everybody dealt with their sewer issues, and I don't want to go beyond that, but there is definitely research that shows the South Valley in New Mexico had the highest rates of diseases having to do with fecal coliform.
And what about in the South Valley community?
Where I live now, or
Say that one more time.
what was, could you repeat
What
the
about
question?
any state action being taken in the South Valley community?
As the Superfund sites, of course, with the nitrate contamination, with the creosote Superfund site and the GE Superfund site that's called the South Valley Superfund site, but it's actually GE, where a lot of nuclear stuff was going on, as well as jet fuel spills, all kinds of chemicals in that area.
And do you believe then, in your opinion, that a high level of exposure to the pollutants that we've been talking about during this hearing will lead to high levels of injury in both the community you're currently in? Well, let's start with that. In the community you're currently in?
In the community that I'm currently in, I don't think I'm as in danger as I was in the Mountain View community.
And then let's go to the Mountain View community. Do you believe then that the high levels of exposure to the pollutants that we've discussed here will lead to high levels of injury in the Mountain View community?
It's a possibility that the air won't, but when you can basically add up the air pollution to the water pollution to the soil pollution, there have been studies that show that that particular area of Albuquerque has a 10-year shorter lifespan.
And just as a final question, how do you think that the proposed rule will help you and your family personally?
Well, my work is not with just my family. My work in environmental justice basically transcends the city, the state, and the country, basically. So anything that's done to protect people from pollution is a benefit to all of us.
Thank you.
You may continue with Mr. Criollo.
My co-counsel, Annalisa. will
Okay.
be-
That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. And for the record, Mr. Criollo's testimony is also in docket number 182, and it's attached as Exhibit 3, and his resume is attached as Exhibit 4.
Okay.
Will you please introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you. My name is Manuel Criollo. It's spelled Criollo.
Thank you. So yesterday during opening statements, we did hear an overview of your educational and your work background. Is there anything that you would like to add?
No, I'm just, I'm very proud first-gen student and now even a returning student from being in the professional field for many years. I'm also, proud product of the community college system.
Mr. Criollo, what does environmental justice look like to you?
Well, for me, I think a lot about the important victories that communities here in Albuquerque and New Mexico and the many native pueblos and indigenous nations here have been at the forefront of environmental justice. I think environmental justice for me means the kind of protection of our civil, human, and environmental rights. I believe it's environmental justice also means combating forms of environmental racism. And, ultimately, like one of the main themes is that all communities should be protected, and that all communities should be protected of having sustainable communities, having the ability for every community member to enjoy, to be able to live, work, play, pray, and love, I say, in wellness and prosperity.
Will you please summarize the environmental justice work that you have done?
Obviously one aspect of it, I teach classes at the University of New Mexico in the American Studies program and in the Peace and Justice certificate program. I have taught classes about, environmental and social movements, both that are situated in the Southwest and that are broadly connected to, movements across the world. But more importantly, of course, I spent almost 20 years at the Labor Community Strategy Center in Los Angeles. The Strategy Center is one of the, sort of sister organizations that emerged in the late 80s to demand issues of, to ending environmental racism. And one particular project that I was, both a member and a leader was the formation of a formation called the Bus Riders Union. It was one of the most important civil rights cases where bus riders organized against the Los Angeles Metropolitan Transportation Authority for many years of disinvestment and moves toward, privatizing that bus system. And so, I've done a lot of work around civil rights and sort of what we called transportation justice, right? Which was at the intersection of environment, civil rights, and mobility for communities.
What are your greatest concerns relating to air pollution?
Well, I'm, of course, I'm pre-diabetic, so I understand that I'm susceptible to air pollution, right? My partner, since we arrived here 5 years ago, has also recently been diagnosed with having, new forms of allergies that she didn't have. We're also in the process of adopting children from the foster system, and that we know that they most likely will have pre-existing conditions and social characteristics that make them very vulnerable to the effects of, air pollution. I would say that the other important aspect to think about, what my greatest concern is, to think that I am also a graduate worker, at the University of New Mexico. Many of my colleagues, which is about 6,000 workers, 6,000 grad students at UNM, many of them who, have live off $23,000 a year, right? That they often, because of their income, have to make decisions about where they live. And they often live in communities that are often what we would consider overburdened communities, right? And so these are sort of important aspects of me. For me, I think the last thing I would say is that, I worry a lot about, climate change. And I think that one aspect that we should not, sort of forget is that how air pollution also impacts, climate change. And therefore, I think that's why I'm really involved in this.
Why did you want to become a party to this particular case?
Well, one, I felt like I didn't want to be just, sitting back and I talk a lot about, movement history. And of course, I arrived here 5 years ago. I really tried to get myself informed. So I didn't initially even, do a lot of work. I think I know Dr. Martinez and the work of Los Jardines. Again, Strategy Center was a member of the Southwest Network for Environmental and Economic Justice, which was, a really important organization that emerged in the 1990s to kind of secure, and expand our knowledge of environmental justice and the struggles against environmental racism. And so, I think that's one thing. And as I stated in my statement, one of the things that when I talked to Dr. Martinez 5 years ago when I arrived, right, they had participated in a report called Life at the Fence Lines, right, which most of their focus initially was a lot about access to food, especially in, low-income people of color communities here in Albuquerque. But one aspect of that report, it talked about how almost 39% of the city, about 280,000 people, lived within what was described as a risk management plan facility, which of course meant that many schools, many health centers were located around these risk management plans and facilities. And so I thought it was really important, and it called for the recommendations for community of impact assessments. And so therefore I thought it was really important. And I'll say lastly that for me, I also felt that it's important that somebody from the University of New Mexico to be involved, to be in solidarity with communities, right? I know that the university for a long time has, in some ways, has institutionalized things like, issues around equity, issues around issues around environmental justice. So I felt that it was really important for somebody from UNM themselves to say, I stand with community.
Mr. Criollo, where do you currently live?
I currently live in the Southeast Heights communities, specifically in the community of Ridgecrest.
How long have you lived there?
I have lived there 2 years. One of the reasons why we moved there was, of course, the access to a lot of green space that exists there. It's very close to the University of New Mexico. We also imagine our home as a multi-generational. My mother actually moved in with us 2 years ago. She didn't like it out here, so she went back, but her room is still in place. And and of course, because we're in the consideration of adopting children, we thought that we knew that some of the best kind of elementary schools exist in that neighborhood. There's a lot of healthcare centers around that area. And just lastly, I think one of the reasons, as a multi-generational household, my mother doesn't drive, and we only also have one car in the family, that it was accessible to the central line, which is probably the only line that really runs in the city. So
what are your primary sources of air pollution within your community?
Well, again, even though my community is lined with these beautiful parks, right? I would say that the primary concerns that I have are issues around airport and mobile sources of car pollution in our communities, right? You can sense the air, living that close. I live less than a mile from Kirtland Air Force Base and also the Sunport, right? And I always say I'm kind of sandwiched between Sandia, the 25 and the 40. And so that's really an important one for me in particular, right? Yeah. But sorry, and one last thing to say is obviously, I am part of a broader community, right? My zip code is 87108, which 87108, excuse me, which includes, the International District, right? So I'm only a mile away from what you could easily just drive through the International District, right? I know through, some of the literature, right? The high level of immigrant workers that, working class families that live there. Of course, it's lined with a lot of small car shops throughout that community. So, I thought it was really important to be involved in this process.
What would you consider to be the most significant environmental injustices across Albuquerque?
It's, again, because of a long set of relationships I've had with, the environmental justice movement and especially important leaders here in Albuquerque. I actually remember coming here in 2003 as part of a member of SNEEJ, of the Southwest Network for Environmental and Economic Justice. And, they gave us a sort of a EJ tour, an environmental justice tour, where we toured, communities like Mountain View, like San Jose, like Barelas, like the South Broadway region. I particularly remember the impact that, of the kind of mass impoverishment that I saw in Pajarito Mesa and the different issues, kind of air quality and water issues that community was impacted. So for me, from the very beginning, my introduction to the environmental justice issues in this region were from other organizers, right? And talking to real community members as they did these tours. And, when I came here, when I would come through, every other few years through just, either for a meeting or for a meeting with friends, those very similar issues were always constantly there. And so, I think one of the aspects that I think that this process is hoping to do is to protect those communities.
How do you think that the proposed rule will address those concerns?
My sense is that, again, it's funny. When I was looking for a house, I actually put an offer in one house, and this was kind of by the Indian school and Carla, more or less. And we actually put the offer, and when I opened up the the kind of history of the property itself, it had a pretty strong provision that says that you could not sell to Black people and to Asians. And, that made me think about, and obviously I know because I come from Los Angeles, and we saw it yesterday about the forms of residential segregation that have existed, right? Through either residential covenants or neighborhood covenants, right? So I don't think it would be a surprise for me that certain communities have also been then overburdened by these forms of, industrial zonings. And so I think that's important for us to think about then which communities have been impacted, right? How it's the role of the government to uphold their civil rights, to uphold sort of the environmental protections for those communities, right? So I think that, those are the things that I'm hoping that we are moving forward as this process continues.
Based on your knowledge of the proposed rule, how do you think that it will help reduce the air pollution harms and protect those vulnerable communities that you speak about from the cumulative impacts of air pollution?
Well, I don't know if I consider myself an expert, right? I'm just a concerned community member, but with some with the principle that communities need to be part of the participation, need to be part of the process of and so this is a very historic moment in some ways, right? That this is a community petitioning this process. I think that, we need strong protections of different forms of, to consider kind of the environmental risk and the environmental health vulnerabilities that certain communities have, right? I think we need, strong regulations and protections for our communities. It's important to think about historically which communities have been impacted. And, I know that this is a permitting process, right? Ultimately, and yet if we still recognize that permitting is still, that there is forms of emissions that are still out there. And so I think it's important for us to, create those protections. And from what I understand, right, from, if I can imagine in 2003, and I know that even the movements for environmental justice, have precedents even up to the 1970s or 1980s here in Albuquerque, that the time is now, right? These are basically the things that communities have been asking for and demanding for and organizing for to get us to this place. So I'm really excited that we're even having an opportunity to have this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Criollo. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Any questions from the board? Go ahead.
Thank you for presenting. Dr. Martinez, can you define in your own words what institutional racism is?
I want to read from,
Okay.
I did my dissertation on discourse analysis, right? And so I'm going to use the discourse analysis professionals. Racism is defined as a system of racial and ethnic inequality that survives only when it's daily reproduced through multiple acts of exclusion, inferiorization, or marginalization. Such acts need to be sustained by an ideological system and by a set of attitudes that are legitimated by differential dominance. Discourse is the principal means for the construction and reproduction of these socio-cognitive frameworks.
Thank you. We heard some testimony yesterday from Dr. Morello-Frosch about social determinants of health and how those play into vulnerable communities. And I was just wondering what your opinion is of looking at social determinants of health in terms of health outcomes and how they might affect health outcomes.
Well, I think my example as a single mother, buying property in the Mountain View community, which was cheaper, again, speaks to that, right? Low income. I personally do not have a PhD, but I come from a family of 8. Everyone has a high school education, but not further than that. My parents had a 3rd grade education. They basically were in the bottom of a canyon until 1945 and came out to electricity and cars. So they were, my father was a worker. We were very much focused on the family. My mother, although because I do have a special ed degree as well, my mother was a brilliant person, and she basically made sure that we were very confident of ourselves, that we knew who we were and that we were not any less than anyone else. And she did, and although she never spoke English, she refused. She was born here and her parents were born here. But she felt that if anyone wanted to really speak to her and make friends with her, then they should speak Spanish. And of course, it was Spanish of the 15th century, right? So it was not the Spanish that is used today. It's a Spanish from northern New Mexico and southern Colorado that actually is basically being extinguished right now.
Thank you. Just one other question. It sounds like you've been involved in environmental justice work here and elsewhere for a very long time. What was kind of a pivotal moment for you? Were there any challenges that you overcame in terms of that organizing where you're like, wow, we finally had an impact? And I guess that's for both of you. I'm just wanting to know a little more about what those how those challenges were overcome, if they ever were, and kind of what led to that victory, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Well, I guess to talk about environmental racism in terms of my experience with racism, that had to do with where I was basically born and raised. Our community is pretty much surrounded by Texans that come in and own land in New Mexico and have very little to do with the Chicanos or Mexicanos that live in Wagamon, right? When I moved to Albuquerque as a student, I really wasn't really conscious of any environmental concerns until I became involved in the environmental justice movement. I was able to go to the first People of Color Leadership Summit that basically launched the environmental justice movement. And at that time I was living in Mountain View. So then I became acutely aware of the fact that there were nothing but industry surrounding us there. And then the issue with the blue baby syndrome really kind of shocked me because the baby was the same age as my youngest son. And that basically, and again, I've done work before that. I have done radio documentaries on the different case studies of poisoning along the US-Mexico border, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge protection by the Gwich'in people. I've interviewed the Trask sisters in Hawaii and the browning that people suffer in Hawaii as a result of lighting up the hotels for the tourists, and basically looking at Cancer Alley, which is like a 70-mile area along Louisiana where it's one chemical facility after another.
Thank you. Dr. Creo?
Not a doctor yet.
Not yet, you're working on
I'm
it?
ABD.
Okay.
ABD now.
Well, that's pretty good.
Yes.
You're almost there.
You know, I would say that, of course, as I mentioned, you know, I was, you know, one of the leaders in the Bus Riders Union in Los Angeles. It's really one of the most successful consumer civil rights organizations. And, you know, we were taking on a $3 billion agency, right, that was destroying its own bus system to construct, you know, to help facilitate the construction of more highways and the construction of a rail and suburban train system. But it came at the cost of inner city communities in Los Angeles. And so we use, you know, the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 14th Amendment to protect the rights of bus riders. And we signed a 10-year consent decree. And out of that decree, which was not, of course, an easy process, as we can imagine, many of the government officials not hearing the needs of bus riders, but through, you know, our collective process, right, we were able to win almost $2.7 billion in improvements. And more importantly, for example, in Los Angeles, when we first began that fight was mainly where much of that bus fleet was all diesel fleet, diesel engine fleet. And because of the victory in Los Angeles to force them to actually replace that fleet and to expand the bus service, it actually created a whole new engine for this compressed natural gas engine, which of course is better for public health. And so, for me, that was the most important victory, that bus riders, people who made less than $12,000 a year, many of them who were women, many of them were immigrant women, many who were Black women, who were at the forefront of building this important movement, right? And really, it's probably one of the last, movements where they were able to use Title VI to be able to enforce and win that important victory.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Chair Paul, any questions? Board Member Arvijo, any questions? No questions. Board Member.
Dr. Martinez, a couple of quick questions. First of all, are members of the Mountain View community, to your knowledge, currently doing any data collection of air quality data?
I'm not aware that anybody's doing, oh, actually, yes, I am. What am I talking about? I was scammed. This is not a secure site, and so I had malware all morning, and I've been at the last couple of hours at the bank, making sure that I'm okay. So, okay. Basically, we recently, through the environmental justice leadership team and process that we created at the Valle del Oro, we were able to get $700,000 to the refuge and the Friends of the Valle del Oro to establish some stationary air monitors, and we're also buying some mobile hand monitors, including at Los Jardines Institute. We work with a lot of charter schools, so we are going to set up what I'm hoping is a really beautiful system. Isleta Pueblo has also gotten some monies to do air quality, so if we can set up the stationary air monitors from Isleta Pueblo to the Mountain View community. We work with the charter school, the South Valley Charter School, which is right in the middle of the Superfund sites, the creosote site and the GE plant. And we're basically have a mobile air monitoring system, so we can kind of hook up that whole area and for the next hearing, have really good solid data.
And so that data is being logged and stored?
Well, right now, all the equipment is being bought.
Okay.
So we're kind of at the beginning of that.
And do you feel like you have sufficient technical support to make sure the data is going to be collected? That the data that you collect will be good quality data?
Yes, we just hired 3 people. As a matter of fact, they were here yesterday. There'll be professionals that are basically coordinating the process, and folks that'll be analyzing the data. And so we're pretty secure that we'll have some really good valid data.
Oh, good. And then another question. Are you aware of any of stakeholder engagement processes or meetings during the development of the proposed regulation? Were there any community meetings that involved stakeholders?
Yes. I know that the Mountain View community has done several community meetings. We ourselves work with the Mountain View Neighborhood Association and basically did a mail out to a 5,000 member mail out to all the San Jose, Pocoloco, Mountain View area, because again, the Pocoloco and the Woodward area is where the Superfund sites are located. So we held one meeting there, and we've been using that listserv to let people know what's going on. But yes, we have been informing people of the issues in there and having some meetings, as well as with industry. I know that the Mountain View Coalition held a meeting for industry as well.
And are you aware of any feedback from the community or from industry, if that feedback actually made it into the proposal?
From the community, yes, because I think after all the meetings, we all kind of, recognize that notice is a problem, right? People, I suggested that obviously would never happen was that, we spent $700 doing a mail out to people. I don't see why NMED couldn't do that, or even the city, right? I mean, that's the impacted community if you want to reach them. And those are basic principles of organizing, right? Our basic principle is that you have to contact 3 people 3 times to get them to a meeting, right?
Great, thanks. I don't have any other questions.
Just one quick announcement. We're going to start public comment at 5:30. So if there's anyone present that wants to sign up, there's a sign up sheet here on the side. We'll resume questioning after the 5:30 session. So, Ms. Kalman?
Thank you. I'll be quick. I just have a couple questions for Dr. Martinez too. You said that you lived in the Mountain View area for 30 years, and I'm just wondering if you could estimate, based on your recollection, how often or how many times during that time members of the community or community groups complained to the city of Albuquerque or went to the city of Albuquerque for help with air quality issues.
At that particular time, no, we went more for the soil issues and again, the nitrate issue, which is still a problem, right? In terms of air quality, I myself don't remember us going in for air quality issues until more recently when that fire was in the Mountain View. Now, there is again, just a lot of industry there. So it's a possibility that people were reporting. I personally did not.
Of the interactions with the city that you do know about, even if they weren't air quality, did you find the city receptive to the community's concerns, or were there issues connecting with the city in that way?
As I remember most, particularly with the nitrate plume, we basically had to organize the community to get people to meetings and to get some results, right? Which was the sewer system build out and the water build out to those areas. But it took the community getting together, a variety of meetings, and finally, the legislators and the city government moved to provide those services. And of course, there's unintended consequences. I was teaching at Rio Grande High School at the time, and one of my students and his uncle were doing trash pickup in the community, including mine. So when they gave up the contract to Waste Management, that was the end of their particular entrepreneurial effort.
And last question, how long did that process take when you had to do that to get results from the city?
Probably from start to finish when everything was put in, it had to have been at least 3 years or so.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Eberline, do you have any questions? Chair Paul? All right, we're going to take a break with your examination. We're going to start taking public comment in a few minutes. If the public comment takes the whole hour, then we will resume at 7 o'clock because we're going to take a half-hour dinner break. So plan on coming back at about 7 o'clock. I think public comment will take the full hour.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you do that, Joe was wondering, I'm not sure for you.
All right, let's settle for public comment. You can please settle, please.
Thanks for saying that.
Anita, if you can call the first person for public comment.
Terry Storch.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
You've got 3 minutes. You'll be signaled when there's 1 minute remaining.
Okay, thank you. My name is Terry Storch, S-T-O-R-C-H. I live north of downtown. I'm a 50-year resident of Albuquerque. I'm a retired attorney, and I've spent many of those 50 years here committed to the well-being of the fellow members of my Albuquerque community. I want to thank the Air Quality Control Board for continuing this hearing in the face of the shameful maligning of your credentials and integrity by certain elected officials, the Albuquerque Journal editorial board, and others. I thank you for recognizing, as those others refused to, that process and the rule of law matters. I thank two Albuquerque City Councilors, Tammy Feeblecorn and Ike Benton, who championed against unexpected odds your continuing your impartial and professional hearing on the HEEI proposal. But most importantly, I thank the Mountain View community and its allies for its vision and its steadfast determination to break new ground to establish cumulative clean air standards that would benefit all of Albuquerque and the county, with focus on the undeniable truth that poor air quality burdens low-income and people of color neighborhoods the most, because permitting decisions have cared little about allowing such dirty enterprises as asphalt plants to locate there. I'm dismayed at the power the New Mexico captains of industry can so easily exert to derail this hearing process, which is no different from any other regulatory process. Public entities with intimate relations with private contractors are also members of this power elite. I am dismayed how some of them, such as the University of New Mexico, which offers programs in environmental justice, so effortlessly align themselves with some of the major polluters in the county, such as the U.S. Air Force at Kirtland Air Force Base, the cause of one of the most threatening and expensive groundwater contaminations to an urban community we know of. What better example of how the polluting and health degrading costs of doing business are shifted from industry onto the rest of us? The history of these David and Goliath battles for workplace safety, clean water, clean air shows that while the captains of industry complain and oppose bitterly, when they're required to conform to safe community standards, they can. They do. They adjust their operations. They absorb costs. They innovate. They get better and greener. They become better neighbors, and they still make their profits. Unregulated, heaven knows the deadly quagmires we would all be living in today. I stand with the Mountain View community and support the HEEI it proposes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Peggy Norton.
Norton, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, you've got 3 minutes. They will signal you when you've got 1 minute left.
What's this? Okay.
because I have not timed my comments. I also want to commend you and thank you for your excellent work and continued diligence through a hurricane, maybe I might say. I am representing the North Valley Coalition. We earlier, several months ago, the board approved support for the HEEI. And we have a philosophy of cumulative impacts, respect, and environmental justice. We all deserve clean air and water. We may not have known all the details that are within the resolution, but I was rather horrified last night at City Council to have them deny us the right to hear the facts of this resolution. And the excellent witness I heard today, Dr. Clark, I'm so glad I got to see him on the way out the door. Last night relied on corporate government interests, citing economic impacts, not health impacts. And right now, I usually have very organized comments, but spinning around in my head is a letter to City Council. I wanted to make sure I got in comments before this ends. We also have a truck stop that we're working on stopping because it will add diesel contaminants to an area that already has 90 percentile of diesel contaminants. I first became aware of some of these issues back when we dealt with the transfer station at the corner of Edith and Griegos. That's when I first learned about cumulative impacts and census tracts and data that was available on census tracts. That also was a low-income area. I was surprised to find out that all the trucks that were going to be coming to the site, the modeling was based only on that site. It did not consider the site next door, the site across the street, or the road out in there. It was like air was just going to stay in this one little contained area. We also now have a nice asphalt plant up in the North Valley at the corner of Carmody and Alexander. That went in with a zoning change that was not approved. No neighborhoods were ever notified of the zone change. I understand there's no site plan required for an asphalt plant. And so we have it and it's there. The EHD, there was a request for a public hearing and that was denied. So there is not a lot of apparent transparency and openness. And last night, as I understand, they supported stopping this hearing process. They were part of a motion that approved that. So we want to stand with the Mountain View community. It's not just there, but it is the city of Albuquerque, including the whole valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Kevin Morrow.
Kevin Morrow.
My name is Kevin Morrow. I'm Deputy Director of City Council Services.
Raise your hand. Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, you got 3 minutes. You'll be signaled when you got 1 minute left.
Certainly, and I would like to yield my time to.
Hold on.
I'd like to yield my turn to Councilor Dan Lewis, who is the 4th person signed up on the list, if I may.
Lewis, if you can raise your hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
You got 3 minutes.
Madam Chair and members of the board, thank you very much. I'm here as a Albuquerque City Councilor. I represent the Albuquerque City Council and grateful to be here to be able to speak to you. I did want to remind you and wanted to share with you that the Albuquerque Council did make a law last night, and that law prohibits this hearing today. And it also prohibits resources of the city of Albuquerque to be spent on behalf of this hearing today as well. So that decision became the law. A supermajority of the Albuquerque City Council voted, and it is the law of the city of Albuquerque as of right now. So I want to remind you of that. We were hoping that you all would understand that and know that. But because you proceeded with this meeting today, I did want to read this letter to you. This letter has been, I think, emailed to you and distributed to the board. We're asking you to cease and desist and request from any other further rulemaking activities. The Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Air Quality Control Board members, this is to you. We write to you requesting that as a member of the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Air Quality Control Board, appointed by the city, that you cease and desist from any further rulemaking activities, including participating in any further hearings on any proposed rules pursuant to the City of Albuquerque Resolution 23-176, which was adopted by a 7-2 vote by the City Council on December 4th, 2023. Resolution 23-176 provides in relevant part that the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Air Quality Board shall have no authority to and shall not make any regulation or standard to address quality of life impacts absent scientific evidence that there is a nexus to air pollution by identifying the quantities and durations of air contaminations that may, with reasonable probability, cause injury or adopt or amend or a standard or regulation whereby the impact on industrial development is by design and not a consequence of preventing or abating air pollution until February 1st, 2024. Furthermore, the resolution prohibits the City of Albuquerque from using its resources to facilitate any action by the board to make, adopt, or amend any regulation as described above until February 1st, 2024. Therefore, the continued participation of the city board appointees and city employees in the current hearing violates the resolution passed last evening. As such, any rule promulgated from this illegal hearing will be invalid. In the event this hearing continues in violation of the past resolution, the City Council will be forced to pursue any legal remedies available to it. And a copy of the resolution is included with this correspondence for your reference. And I would remind you, members of the board, that the Albuquerque City Council appointed this board. We do appreciate your volunteers, and we appreciate you. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to come for you today. Thanks very much.
Councilor Lewis, if I may ask a couple of quick questions. My name, sorry.
The board attorney.
Okay.
Well, no, go ahead.
Well, my name is Joe Galuski, and you voted to approve my nomination to the board in April of this year. I am a professor of atmospheric sciences at the University of New Mexico with over 20 years of experience in atmospheric transport modeling. I do not understand why now you voted to remove me from the board. Could you explain why you voted to remove me from the board?
Sir, you have the opportunity to be able to reapply to be on the board. But the resolution that actually the ordinance that you're speaking of is an entirely different resolution, an entirely different bill than what was passed, than what I'm referring to right now. The resolution prohibits you from having this hearing. This hearing is absolutely illegal.
I understand that point, but do you understand my question? Why would you vote for me in April and then turn around? Like, I've been participating in good faith. My interest in serving on this board was genuinely to serve my community with my expertise, and I don't understand.
Yeah, and I'd love to answer that. It's not that
Please, let's have some order here, please.
It may be that if you apply again, that I might approve you again, sir. I may do that. But the ordinance that you're talking about is an ordinance that I think is very reasonable, that the City of Albuquerque would require that there's some criteria. We do this on many of our boards, whether it be the EPC, many of other boards that require certain criteria, that you have a certain type of background, that you have different professional backgrounds, and so that we can guarantee that there's some diversity on the board. And so you may likely contribute to that kind of diversity that we could eventually have on this board. That ordinance was passed as well the other night. That is the law of the City of Albuquerque. That one takes a little bit longer for the clerk to verify, but the resolution was enacted and became law last night. We also passed a resolution last night that where we're going to work together with the county commission, and we're going to have a committee where we're going to come together, and I think we're going to have a new ordinance that's going to adopt both together some of the criteria that's in our ordinance as well. I do want to say, I realize you are all volunteers, and I'm very grateful for the service that you give to the city.
Also, just briefly, I have not received this email that you just described.
You're going to get the email. The press will get the email. I think everybody in here, if you'd like an email, you'll get this email. You'll get this letter that's comes from the City of Albuquerque, signed by the councilors who voted on this bill last night, by many of them, and you'll get a copy of this. And so I appreciate you hearing me tonight and taking this to heart. I mean, certainly, you can imagine how disappointed I was. I'm duly elected by the citizens of the people of Albuquerque, and so were the other 9 members of the council in the city of Albuquerque, duly elected by the people in this city. And we enact laws, and we expect that those laws would be carried out. And so you can imagine how disappointed that I was today, and wanted to give you the opportunity to be able to respect the Albuquerque City Council in that regard. But because the proceeding went forward, I felt like I needed to come here tonight and just remind you of it. And you'll get the document as well. You'll also get the signed bill that the clerk has documented, and it's in the books.
Mr. Councilmember, my name is Antoinette Cedillo Lopez. I'm the attorney for the board. And as I've researched and looked everywhere, there is nothing that describes the effective date of a resolution. Nothing. There is an effective date for the ordinance, and that would be 5 days after it's published. To my knowledge, it has not been published. So this is a valid constituted board until it is effective. And as I said, there is no effective date for the ordinance. It did not specify that it was an emergency ordinance. So I would presume, and it seems logical, that it would be the same as the ordinance, which would require 5 days after publication. I am unaware of whether it's been published. You stated it is, and then you also stated that the board has received notice. To my understanding, they haven't. Certainly, I have not received notice. So with that, I'm sorry, I think this is just you saying something is valid without any legal background saying it's valid.
So, Madam Board Member, I'm glad you asked that question, and our city attorney is here to answer that, who's an expert on the city charter. And let me give you the exact words of what the city charter says regarding a resolution, and I'll have Mr. Morrow say that to you, explain it to you.
Certainly.
I should also mention that I did speak to Lauren Keefe about this, the city attorney, and who said that there is nothing that describes the effective date of a resolution.
No, I would agree that there is nothing. I would state that general statutory construction is that in the absence of something, when the date of ordinances is clearly contemplated as 5 days past the date of publication, the fact that resolutions don't have similar language suggests that the plain language of the charter would control, which says that it becomes effective. Does not say effective. It says that it passes upon a vote of the city council. So
absolutely, it passes.
Correct.
But that does not specify its effective date. And its effective date, I would argue, should be the same as an ordinance in order to have time for the public to be aware of what has happened and for implementation to occur.
Certainly.
So I will argue that if you take any, as you threatened, legal action, I'm happy to make that argument.
Certainly, and I appreciate that. I would say that we did
And
not distribute the
Ms.
letter at this
O'Keefe,
point.
I also, just to finish,
Yes.
Ms. O'Keefe also said that she would be defending the actions of the board.
Okay, I appreciate that. First off, her name is Ms. Keefe, but that being said, as she said in the council meeting last night, her belief was that it did become valid upon enactment by the city clerk, who did enact it this afternoon. That is part of the attachment that we will send.
That is not what she told me this afternoon.
Okay.
What she said was, she stated that it was unclear because there is no specification about a resolution, and especially a resolution that is so draconian as this one should require time for notice to the public, notice to the board, which hasn't even occurred, and time for implementation.
Sure. And I would also suggest that generally the theory behind notice is that people are aware that something has been passed. And I think it is clear that everyone present, including the board and yourself, is aware that the city council passed this resolution, that it did so as a veto override. But that being said,
What we are
this
not
isn't
aware
really
of
an
is the
open forum.
effective date.
What?
We are not aware of the effective date.
So I would disagree and say that we are aware that it was passed by city council last evening, but I think that's as far as we need to.
As I said, I will argue this point in court.
All
I will
right.
see you in court.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Madam Chair. Yeah, and Madam Board Member, I would again reiterate that this was a resolution that was introduced months ago. And a resolution, and clearly, our city attorney explained that immediately.
Miss- City Councilor Lewis, you keep referring to me as the chair.
I
This is the
said
chair.
that, Madam Board Member.
I'm not a board member. As I explained, I'm the city attorney.
You're absolutely right.
I'm
I
the board
apologize. You are
attorney,
the attorney.
not the city attorney. I'm the board attorney.
I do apologize. I do apologize. We had this discussion last night, and Ms. Keefe, our city attorney, certainly specified the difference between an ordinance and a resolution. And that when a resolution goes through the process, I mean, the city clerk put a number on it today, and it becomes law in the city of Albuquerque. So today, this bill is law in the city of Albuquerque.
It may be law when it is effective.
Ms. Richards, you have a
And
question?
ma'am, I don't mean any disrespect whatsoever, so I apologize for not addressing you in the correct way.
Councilor Lewis, my name is Kitty Richards. I'm a county appointee to the board. I've served this community as a public servant with the County Environmental Health Department, as well as with the State of New Mexico Environment Department, and with the State of New Mexico Department of Health as an epidemiologist, as an environmental scientist, and as a manager over community health. I've also worked in the healthcare industry for 6 years, which is a large employer. I have now volunteered for a few years here as a representative of the Air Quality Control Board. I was chair and now I'm vice chair. I am very, very deeply, deeply disturbed by how you've divided our community. I have seen all of the stuff in the newspapers, and I think a lot of it was promulgated by your actions. I fear for my family, I fear for my own life, and it was absolutely unnecessary. And I really, if you're an elected official, to try and villainize me because of your statements which were utterly untrue and put my family at risk, it's just unjustifiable. I feel like I am a poll worker in Georgia. It's absolutely unnecessary.
Ma'am, the ordinance that was passed by the city council, that the mayor vetoed and that the council overrode last night is the ordinance that you're referring to. That creates a criteria for a board.
I'm not
members.
referring to any ordinance. I'm referring to press releases from your office
It doesn't apply to
and
you.
from media that has picked up those press releases and that has maimed my name a public servant for 25 years, not great pay, but because of my service and my concern about my community.
Right, yeah.
And thank you very much for doing that for me and putting my family at risk.
Yeah, the ordinance doesn't apply to the county commission whatsoever. You know.
Please,
Folks, this is inappropriate. This is public comment. Let everyone have their public comment. I agree that Councilor Lewis's actions were inappropriate too, but this doesn't help us proceed. So I would ask people to make their comments
Look, if what I
next in
wrote was
line, please, to us.
any further
Madam
questions
Chair,
from?
if what I wrote was inappropriate, certainly, that's your opinion. And what the actions of the city council, and remember that these are actions of a majority of the city council.
Did I hear an
But
apology?
they don't apply to the county commission.
I'm sorry, did I hear an apology from you?
Apology for what? What is it? What exactly? are you
Apology
apologizing
for villainizing me and putting my safety at risk.
I don't
by
believe I villainized you or put your safety at risk, ma'am.
You've called me an environmental extremist. You've called me a professional job killer. You've said that I have a conflict of interest because I have expertise. And those have all been publicly stated in your press releases, as well in the media that had been picked up through your press releases.
Well, I believe you do have a conflict of interest. I think that's.
And
been,
you are welcome
public
to your
information.
belief,
And I
but-
stand by my other statements.
You stand by that I'm an environmental extremist and that I'm a professional job killer?
I believe that members of this board are.
Oh, you do?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I think you're very, very wrong, and I'm sorry you have that perception.
Any further comments from the board or questions? Okay, your time's up.
Thank you.
Next.
My name is Barbara Grothus.
Raise your right hand, please.
I'm sorry. Okay. Grothus.
Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
I do. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I cannot believe the good fortune I have to follow that act. Thank you very much. I'm an artist. I have no expertise about anything that we're talking about here today in terms of all the things you all bring to the table. I've been making work about the extinction, the sixth extinction, which we are now in, proceeding at the most rapid pace since any previous extinction, the last of which lasted 1 to 2.5 million years. It was the dinosaur extinction, which we have ample evidence here of in New Mexico. We are on a path to destroy ourselves. The dinosaurs lasted 163 million years, and we are here now at 63 million years since the last extinction, of which there have been 5 prior. These people who come here and put their profits and their businesses, which are large, and as Terry Storch clearly stated, can pay the price of doing business in a safe and clean way to protect our communities and look to the future. I'm ready to go to jail if they want to take me tonight. I'm happy to go. It won't be the first time, but this is outrageous. And I am just here to say I thank you all for your hard work, your diligence, your expertise, and your service to the community. I really, truly appreciate it. And I hope that the last thing I want to say is that we are the first species who actually know that we're going to create this extinction, that we are in the process. We know this. The dinosaurs did not know that. We're a failed species because we put profit above every other piece of science and knowledge that we have. And I am very sorry to hear this city councilor come here and tell us to cease and desist. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next. One moment, please. State your name for the record, please.
My name is Joe Sackett.
Can you spell your last name?
Sackett.
Okay, raise your right hand, please. You swear that you'll tell the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
You have 3 minutes. You'll be signaled when you have 1 minute left.
Thank you. As I said, my name is Joe Sackett. I live in the downtown neighborhoods of Albuquerque. I want to thank you for your hard work, all of you. And thank you for your time tonight. Industry doesn't like regulation. Big oil didn't want to see the end of leaded gasoline. Automobile producers didn't want to install catalytic converters or other pollution equipment on their cars. Truck and heavy equipment builders opposed low sulfur diesel fuel. Nobody is surprised by this, I'm sure. Capitalism is a very powerful engine. And like any powerful engine, it must be controlled. Otherwise, it will destroy itself and its environment as well. Regulation is necessary. It is entirely appropriate. And the last time I looked, car companies and oil producers were making record profits. Potential producers of harmful air pollution in our community must follow rules and regulations in order to protect the people who live here. And this week's events have made it clear that those of us who care about this are going to have to work much harder to ensure that we are represented by people who get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. And just as a reminder, we are going to have a 6:30 cutoff for public comment. And once again, tomorrow at 5:30, we will continue with public comment for 1 hour. So,
sorry to interrupt, Mr. Hearing Officer. Mazelnock with the last interim at a different microphone. Would it be possible to have additional public comment time given the amount of air Dan Lewis took up in the public comment period?
If it helps the board, Mr. Hearing Officer, members of the board, if it helps the board, the petitioner's remaining witness, Dr. O'Donnell, is not available this evening. She won't be available until tomorrow.
Expanded to 6:45. Okay, till 6:45.
Thank you.
And raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
Yes.
State your name and spell your last name, please.
Eileen O'Shaughnessy, O''SHAUGHNESSY. Long Irish name.
You've got 3 minutes.
As I said, my name is Eileen O'Shaughnessy, and I'm a college instructor, a PhD candidate, and co-founder of the grassroots group Demand Nuclear Abolition. I want to thank the Air Quality Board for holding this hearing, and I just want to say that you all have my imminent respect for being lawbreakers now, because sometimes the law is wrong. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for continuing so that the voice of the people can be heard. I'm here to join my voice in support and solidarity with youth, elders, grassroots groups, experts, and scientists to show strong support for the HEEI regulation. When I reflect on the lessons of the deadly and ongoing COVID-19 global pandemic, 3 truths come to mind. Number 1, we are all interconnected. Number 2, healthy lungs, air, and breath are essential to all of our survival. And number 3, industrial contamination, human-caused destruction of the environment will continue to weaken our immune systems and unleash horrors that we have yet to see coming around the bend. Passing the HEEI regulation would be a step in the right direction to providing protection for vulnerable communities and accountability for polluting industries. I am grateful to the leadership of the Mountain View Coalition, Los Jardines Institute, the New Mexico Environmental Law Center. When frontline communities like Mountain View speak up, we all need to listen and to follow their lead. Environmental harms like contamination and pollution are never evenly distributed and are predominantly located next to communities of color. I teach courses about social and environmental justice, and one of the core concepts that I discuss with my students is the precautionary principle, which essentially states that if a product, an action, or a policy has a suspected risk of causing harm to the public or to the environment, protective action should be supported before there is complete scientific proof of a risk. Essentially, first, do no harm. The HEEI is providing one way to enact this common sense approach. Climate change is real and it's upon us. More wildfires, hotter summers, fiercer storms. According to the World Health Organization, worsened air quality is directly connected to climate change, and it's responsible for 4.2 million premature deaths worldwide, 4.2 million. The WHO also states that most policies to reduce air pollution offer a win-win strategy for both health and climate. Lower levels of air pollution result in better cardiovascular and respiratory health of populations, while also reducing CO2 emissions. The HEEI is a tool to give our future generations a fighting chance. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next.
Shelby Bazan or Baton. I apologize if I got your name wrong.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
If you can state your name, spell your name as well.
Yes. Shelby Bazan, Bazan. First, I would like to thank you for your time in continuing the hearing and accepting public comments. My name is Shelby Bazan, and as an environmental educator throughout Albuquerque and the surrounding areas, I often am taking students outside to what most of us would consider natural spaces. These natural spaces are often tainted with views of smoke plumes, and particle dust from various industries. I spent a lot of time in the Mountain View community and with the community members from Los Jardines Institute, the Mountain View Coalition, and more who are doing work on the ground to combat environmental impacts from Sandia Labs, the Air Force Base, BCP Inc., metal facilities, asphalt plants, and more. I spent time in these spaces with students kinder through college, and although the span of ages is vast, they all understand the concept of air pollution and the need to protect the environment and themselves. Last week, I was with local fourth graders talking about ideas on how they can help the environment, and almost all of them said they could plant trees to improve our air. These fourth graders are our future and deserve clean air. I urge everyone to think of these fourth graders' future with the air that they breathe in, play in, pray in, and live in. Air unites us together regardless of age, race, gender, income, and more. I recognize that these industries provide jobs for our communities, and therefore the workers should also be protected. It is not realistic to halt production, but how can we increase a healthy lifespan for these workers and children? I support the Air Quality Control Board and the HEEI as a lifelong Boqueña and resident. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Christopher Ramirez.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
State your name.
Christopher Ramirez, Ramirez.
You got 3 minutes.
My name is Christopher Ramirez, and I want to recognize that we are on the unceded lands of Tiwa peoples. I live downtown in Reynolds Addition and work with Together for Brothers. I am specifically speaking today because after I learned the actions of City Council to stop these important hearings, I also appreciate my City Councilor Ike Fenton being one of only 2 City Councilors not to override the mayor's veto. As a community organizer, I have learned and seen firsthand the impact of environmental racism in Albuquerque's most impacted communities. This includes T4B's recent organizing for transit equity and zero fares for the past 6 years. We know that the most transit-dependent neighborhoods, including downtown, International District, and Westgate, are also some of the most overburdened with air pollution. Let's be clear, this means low income and communities of color in these neighborhoods are more likely to experience respiratory diseases and other negative impacts and illnesses. HEEI and cumulative impacts make so much sense to take into account with not just one site, but the accumulation of sites like we see in East San Jose and South Broadway, but also other neighborhoods like Mountain View, and most recently in the Westgate neighborhood that has seen an influx in shipping, trucking, and warehouses along the I-40 corridor between Unser and Paseo, as well as the co-location of the city's largest school bus idling station in the city. Because of our consistent low and often failing rankings in air quality in multiple reports, it makes sense to move forward with these recommendations. I'm also concerned with the attack on a city board and its membership. I joined a city board, the Transit Advisory Board, in 2019 when only 1 of 10 members was a transit-dependent bus rider, and also she was the only other person of color. This was a board with a diversity issue. I want to acknowledge the service of the Air Quality Board and your qualifications. I'm also concerned using language including diversity and environmental justice to enable big and polluting industries to continue and expand, harming and polluting our communities. We have to center most impacted communities and undo the historic and current harm to the air, land, and water. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your board service.
Next.
Lauren Micklejohn.
And looks like my timer is back. Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
State your name.
Lauren Micklejohn, last name M as in Mary, Eiklejohn.
All right, you've got 3 minutes. They'll signal you when you've got 1 minute left.
Excellent, thank you. A very good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you for being here tonight and for your tremendous courage and ethic of public service. I'm changing up my statement a little bit tonight because of what we have witnessed. And so I'm standing here in support of you all. It is understandable that this proceeding has generated controversy, fear, and uncertainty from industries and small business owners who depend on a reasonable and implementable and predictable permitting system that allows them to pursue their livelihoods and contribute to the development of our state. On the other hand, Albuquerque must also keep pace with its peers across the country and address cumulative impacts and deal with legacy and emerging environmental harms. I am confident that this board has the capacity to promulgate a rule that is equitable and fair for our entire community, both environmental justice communities and the regulated community alike. We need a regulation that is simple, implementable, and effective at improving air quality and protecting public health without being overly burdensome to the regulated community and without unnecessary reporting requirements that do not actually improve air quality. Our overburdened communities need a more robust air pollution control equipment and a reduction of exposure to air pollutants. We need a rule that clarifies the definition and parameters of an overburdened community using census tract data so that every stakeholder is on the same page and provides an environment of certainty, which all stakeholders deserve. I encourage you to continue to pursue the spirit that was originally proposed in this in the proposed regulation, that in an implementable way with a targeted focus. And through doing this, which I know you are able to, really show the gaslighting that we have been subjected to for what it really is. I know that there is a regulation in here that can serve Albuquerque the way that Albuquerque deserves to be served. I urge this board to consider the full evidentiary record before it, meaning facts and truth, which I know you all capable of distinguishing, unlike perhaps some of our other current seated representatives in this city. And I think that by considering the evidentiary record, you guys will come up with a rule that will function and make sure that we move forward in terms of progress in environmental justice and regulations for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Marla Painter.
Thank you to Ms. Micklejohn for your former service on this board.
Raise your right hand, please.
Madam Chair, members, I'm sorry,
You swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Your name, please.
Marla Painter. Madam Chair and members of the board, I apologize for my earlier lack of decorum, but me and my family's life have also been put into jeopardy because of the words of Dan Lewis, and it's hard to not get emotional about it. I'm the president of Mountain View Community Action, and I live in the Mountain View neighborhood. For many years, the residents of Mountain View, East San Jose, and Greater Gardner neighborhoods have sought a remedy to the inequitable concentration of polluting businesses in their residential areas. These low-income working-class neighborhoods where the people live who do the service jobs, the dirty jobs, the 8-to-5 jobs that keep this community running. We have petitioned the Air Board to adopt the regulation before you to address the grievances of people without political power to manipulate our regulatory system. They don't have the power of a Dan Lewis. You are our last line of hope. As a privileged Anglo woman who has lived and worked in low-income communities my entire life, I am I am shocked by the lack of moral responsibility to the greater good exhibited by the parties opposing this regulation. And more shockingly, our elected officials and the City Environment Department, which suddenly has become openly hostile to members of our community, including myself. The City Environmental Health Department interacts with us in a passive-aggressive, non-productive manner. They are disinterested in finding creative, innovative ways to address problems. They equivocate to their attorneys, who are the champions of no, rather than to the needs of the people they are sworn to serve. They deflect any change to ways things have always been done this way. Over the years and recently, we have met in good faith with the businesses who believed they would be negatively affected by this regulation. At meetings, we have oftentimes been met with hostility and no constructive suggestions. We wanted to work with our business neighbors, but it was not possible. They seem to have no interest in how their operations impact our lives. Where's the moral responsibility to solve, as a community, a widely accepted public health problem? We know the business community is motivated by profit. Some may even say greed. I don't think that's necessarily true. They're just in business. I am much more morally outraged that the university that claims to serve the community also puts making money above the greater good of the community it purports to serve. Shame on them. And they cannot even point to one specific way this regulation would harm their bottom line, because they appear to care more about the bottom line than they do about this place they are assigned to serve. And perhaps more outrageous is that our taxes are being used to pay expensive attorneys to oppose low-income people in this community. Why is the military-industrial complex in this town paying expensive civilian lawyers to go after us, the people the Constitution tasks them to protect? Especially when they cannot point to one instance where this regulation would hinder their operations. And if the reg did hinder their operations somehow, why would they not be required to operate in a way that protects the community? Why can't we get phone calls returned by a congressional delegation when we ask them why taxpayer dollars are paying for the military to step on the necks of regular people who suffer disproportionately from environmental injustices?
One minute.
Especially when the President of the United States has ordered them to incorporate environmental justice concerns into their day-to-day operations, and they do not follow that order. This regulation would protect the most vulnerable people, children, elders, the frail, to the health dangers inherent in air pollution emitted in vulnerable neighborhoods. The reg would apply to a relatively small portion of the city county. So I challenge you to approve this regulation, to make it better, to do whatever you can to make it serve us as it should. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I may ask a question.
Yes,
Ms.
Ms. Baker.
Painter, you did mention something that I just wanted to hear a little bit more about, which was engagement with the business community from your perspective and with Mountain View.
Right.
You said that there were some, I don't know, would you expand on that engagement?
Well, over the years, we've had many meetings. One in particular I remember is when we tried to get a sector plan, a county sector plan.
Sorry, specifically for this,
Well,
this.
it involved the air pollution problems, and we wanted to engage them in ways very early on. This is like 15 years ago, about how we could deal with the air pollution problems. And instead, they shut that whole process down. And most recently, we met with them. We had a meeting at the Mountain View Community Center, and we were open to asking them, all right, how can we work together on this? What are your specific objections so that we can work with it? And we were met with either silence or them accusing us of trying to shut down businesses. There was no give and take. There was no suggestions that we could bounce off of and talk about together. No creative problem solving. They were just opposed.
Do you have an estimate of how many meetings or instances of reaching out that you did?
Well, since this proposal has been out there, we reached out once, but we invited them to submit in writing ways in which they would improve the proposal. We did not get one response, and we told them we were open to continue to meet. but never got a response to that either.
Thank you very much for helping me fill in the gaps that the board doesn't fully know about from our own proceedings. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next,
Alexander Snyder.
raise your right hand, please.
Alexandra, I'm a girl.
Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
Yes, I do.
And state your full name once again and speak into the microphone.
Alexandra Snyder, SNYDER.
Okay, you've got 3 minutes.
It'll be faster than that. Again, thank you to the board for your. Oh, sorry.
Pull it. There you go.
Thank you to the board for your hard work. It's appreciated. Representing the Conito Real Neighborhood Association, I am here to support the Mountain View community in their petition for HEE regulation, ensuring that the South Valley is protected from further impacts by industries that degrade our air quality, especially in this area of the Bernalillo County. As a 30-year resident of the South Valley, I take strong exception to Councilor Lewis's depiction of our community's efforts to protect our air and quality of life as environmental extremism. We are asking for long overdue environmental justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Heaven Lucero.
So Sarah, if you want to raise your right hand, do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
Yes.
State your name.
My name is Heaven Lucero, Lucero. I work for the Pueblo Vasleda Environment Department as an environmental technician, and I'm also an enrolled tribal member of Pueblo Vasleda. And am here in support of the HEEI regulation. I want to thank you all for allowing me to provide this comment this evening. I want the board and the public to know that community members in the Pueblo Vasleda are well aware of connections between health of the environment and health of the people in and around these environments. The topic of air quality is one of the most discussed concerns amongst community members to Vasleda Environment Department. In the mornings and evenings, where the sun is at certain angles, you can see the air pollution. And we get calls frequently from community members asking what is in the air north of Isleta, and will they be okay to go outside? These questions and concerns break my heart because this is the reality we live in, where the health of my community is always a topic of discussion and not for good reasons. Unfortunately, it is common in Isleta to have a family member or know of someone within the Isleta community who has been personally affected by cancer. This proposed rule is necessary to protect not only my community, but those disproportionately impacted communities who have long been affected by air pollution. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next.
Jacob White.
Mr. White, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
And state your name, please.
Jacob White.
Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, hearing officer and members of the Air Quality Control Board. My name is Jacob White, and I am speaking in support of the HEEI regulation. I'm a current student at UNM and have called Albuquerque home for the majority of my life. I also work in the ecological restoration field, but first and foremost, I am a member of our youth. And I believe that by being here today, I am representing the voices and interests of the youth in addition to those you have heard from already. This regulation would help provide critical safeguards for our most vulnerable communities against the disproportionate impacts of air pollution. In the face of climate change, it is imperative to imagine and seek alternatives to economic development that benefit our community economically while promoting the social, environmental, and political vitality and longevity of our community. Economic growth and development currently comes at the expense of people and the planet. However, it doesn't have to be this way. Currently, air polluting industries conducted in our community jeopardize the sustainability and habitability of our only home, Earth. I am here also representing a multi-billion-dollar business sector known as ecological restoration. Ecological restoration provides safe and sound opportunities for creating community resilience and promoting community vitality. This is an exponentially growing business sector generating billions in revenue in the US and has tremendous relevance to New Mexico. This field results in a multiplier effect by enhancing and diversifying our local recreation sector, job opportunities, and the economy overall, resulting in a multitude of benefits to the environment and society. It is estimated that every dollar invested in restoring degraded lands generates an estimated $7 to $30 in economic benefit, in addition to a multitude of other indirect benefits, such as ecosystem services. There are countless areas across our city that are sites of legacy pollution in need of true restoration, rather than capping or relocating pollution and toxic waste to other communities. We must ask ourselves, how can we sustain our communities when development and growth has historically been predicated on promoting the expansion of industries and businesses that adversely impact our community?
You have 1 minute, 1 minute.
Often resulting in the abandonment of contaminated sites in our communities. Industries often do little.
Slow down
Sorry.
just a bit.
Industries often do little to remediate these areas that often sit idle or are left to taxpayers and local authorities to remedy. Industries and businesses have the ability to come and go as they please, but often communities aren't afforded the same privilege or have other reasons for staying. Our communities are ready for the promises of environmental justice to be fulfilled. It is time to undertake the momentous task of healing our lands and communities, not promote the continuous destruction of it. I urge the board to also consider leaving the public record open for public comment if possible, even if this rulemaking isn't allowed to commence, to reflect the public's voice on this matter. Thank you for your consideration of this regulation and for your service to our community.
Thank you very much. Next.
Joe Sackett. I apologize. Jaron Poplinski.
Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
State your name, spell your last name.
Jaron Poplinski, P-E-P-L-I-N-S-K-I. Read slowly. I only got 3 minutes. Honorable members of the committee, I'm here in support of the HEEI regulations. I stand before you today not only as a dedicated advocate for environmental protections, but as a concerned citizen deeply invested in the well-being of our communities. Having spent numerous years working towards safeguarding our natural resources, particularly in soil and water protection, I am compelled to address the pressing issue of air quality regulations. The current state of our environment, where private industries wield disproportionate influence through lobbying efforts, has led to an alarming degradation of the commons. This unrestricted exploitation not only exacerbates existing socioeconomic disparities, but directly impacts the health of our community members who bear the physical and economic burdens of regulatory neglect. Growing up in the Midwest, but living and working in various parts of the country, and since moving here in 2021, I have truly been stunned by the number of chronic illnesses that persist across generations here due to environmental injustices, and I am appalled by the lack of reparations and accountability. The debate on the necessity of cumulative air quality data is disheartening, considering the evident consequences of pollution on public health. I am steadfast in my belief that the right to a clean environment is inherent and should not be compromised. The hidden impacts of pollution on life expectancy, brain development in children, and cognitive ability in adults are equally significant, demanding urgent attention. It's truly incredible that we are even debating the need for cumulative impact data in informed decision-making. It reminds me of when I was living and working in another part of the country where black lung had come back recently. It had largely disappeared for many years due to regulations for many years prior when it was first identified, but when the rates of illness restrictions fell off, people stopped worrying about protecting themselves, so it came back. I implore you to consider the long-term repercussions of further deregulation. While private industries argue that it fosters economic development, we cannot ignore the devastating toll it takes on our natural environment and the residents of our great state. New Mexicans deserve more from their public officials, a commitment to prioritizing public health and environmental sustainability over corporate interests. It is crucial to dispel the misconception that economic progress and environmental quality are mutually exclusive. We have the capacity to build a robust and resilient economy without sacrificing the very air that we breathe. Our path to progress requires a collective and unwavering commitment to reversing the damage of a very brief period in our planet's history that we have filled with pollution. Monitoring air quality is foundational to this effort, an essential step towards a healthier and sustainable future. I urge you to stand firm in your responsibilities to the people of New Mexico, resisting the undue influence of private industries. Let us pave the way for a state that leads in both economic prosperity and environmental stewardship, leaving a legacy that future generations can be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
John Dietz.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
I do. My name is Holly Dietz. I was born in Albuquerque, as well as my family's been here for generations.
Spell your last name, please.
Dietz.
Okay, thank you.
I have lived in the Mountain View Neighborhood Association in the neighborhood for 25 years. 13 years ago, I was diagnosed with lung cancer. I've been a non-smoker. I've lived a healthy life. I have no family history of cancer. Why would that be? I'm here to support the Environmental Protection Agency full force, and I agree with the last speaker. I think we cannot let industry set the standards for how people are protected. We need environmental protection from all of us, and so I support you, and just wanted to say I support the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Eric Sanchez.
I think we have time for 2 more comments, public comments. Once again, we'll have public comment tomorrow starting at 5:30 to 6:30. Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
Yes.
State your name again.
My name is Eric Sanchez. And I just want to thank y'all for being here this week, starting yesterday, and as much as work that y'all have put into it. I appreciate the question that you gave down, Lewis. I forget your name. And who is this? Mr. Blue shirt. Yes.
Galuski.
Glinsky. Okay. Just wanted to call you by name. And just for holding space today with that intensity and diversion and fragmentation that we're experiencing within our community. It's very obvious that we're fragmented and there's some division that is occurring. There are facts, you know, we have people are throwing out facts all day, and we have these scientists coming in with things that make sense in a way that we can read in a textbook. The distance that we have put ourselves with our place in the environment is the issue. It's that there's a disconnection between us and the environment, that we cannot see the facts for what they are. So we intellectually masturbate these things into the point, right? Sorry to use that coarse word, but that's what it is we're using our minds to try to create a world that only exists in our world. And the reality is that I want to speak to is more the fact of us being connected to nature. And that is what I'm experiencing or seeing in these conversations, is that people are not really understanding their place with nature. And I don't want to sound more hippie than it's necessary, but that's where we're coming to now, is that these facts that are linking us from the idea of the stars in your eyes and so forth, whatever. We're now understanding how closely related we really are to either a tree growing or a bird flying overhead. And that is all within the scope of the air that we breathe. It's okay to make mistakes in life. It's okay to have lived your whole life believing in a lie. You can turn back. And I'm not speaking to you all specifically, but I'm saying that if you can take something from my words is to speak to those other people that are dividing us, or to speak to yourself in the parts that you haven't reconciled within yourself, to look at yourself and to see if you're really living an authentic life and having authentic relationships, whether it be with your family and loved ones, or whether it be that hike that you go and see a bird fly over you. What does that really mean? I mean, and so that's what I say is like, it's okay to be wrong and to have followed a whole career path, or to have believed in ideas that are now coming out to be just not true. And I say that it is not true because we inherently know as humans that there's something more beautiful that we could be creating and harmonizing together. It's enough of the confusion, enough of the fragmentation. I just hope that we can create some kind of harmony. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. We have time for one more public comment.
Jane Yee.
Raise your right hand, please. You swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
speak into the microphone, and please state your name, please.
What's that?
State your name and speak into the microphone
Oh, of course.
so the
Thank you.
court reporter can hear you.
Well, good evening, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Good evening, Madam Chair. And good evening, members of the Air Board.
And your name once again?
My name is Jane Yee, and I'm a member of Cambio, which is a community organization that supports the political and cultural self-determination of the people that live in the South Valley. And you may know us as one of the primary organizers of the Dia de Muertos parade and celebration in the South Valley. And I am here today. My comment is in support of the HEEI and the board's role in making sure that this proposed rule gets a fair hearing, despite the outrageous, undemocratic resistance that you have faced in just doing that. And I didn't vote for Councilor Davis, but I do apologize, and I submit an apology of sorts for that behavior that we witnessed, all of us witnessed earlier this evening. I've been practicing regulatory law for about 35 years, and I'm sad to say that on most days, our regulatory process at this point in our democracy, in our so-called democracy, fails working people and fails people of color because the playing field is not level. The regulated entities show up at the hearings with their armies of experts and armies of lawyers, and there's also the revolving door, and that creates an unlevel playing field. I'm here today to thank you for, well, let me say this. I urge you to give weight to the expertise of the people in our communities, people like Sofia Martinez and Manuel Criollo, who testified today, because these are the true experts. They have professional credentials. They have professional experience, but more important than that, they have the experience of living in, again, the so-called overburdened communities. They are overburdened communities. That's not a buzzword. That's a real word, because they have lived their lives exposed to their disproportionate share of pollution and all kinds of inequalities.
Time's up.
And beyond that,
You need to wrap it
I
up.
would like to say,
Your time's up, but wrap it up.
okay. Could I just say
Sure.
one more thing?
Sure.
All right. I would like to say that they not only face pollution, but they face the political harassment that we saw earlier this evening. Councilor Lewis told me when I said your behavior was bullying, he said, what was bullying was all the emails that I've been getting from the community telling me not to be a bully, not to violate the law, which he is doing. He is violating the law because this ordinance violates the Air Quality Control Act. And I say that seriously as a regulatory attorney. The city of Albuquerque is abdicating its regulatory responsibilities under the act, and it is also violating equal protection and due process. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and break. We'll have a dinner break for about 30 minutes. Speaking of bullying, I just want to remind attorneys, their clients, and the public to maintain civility in this building. There's been at least one report of disparaging or insulting remarks. Keep those to yourself. The council says that's fine. And if you can raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. First off, I just want to thank.
Let's get your name.
Sorry. State Senator Harold Pope Jr., representing District 23 Northwest Albuquerque.
Thank you.
All right. First off, I want to thank you all for your service here in the county of Bernalillo and the city of Albuquerque. I did see a little bit of the stuff that happened earlier, so I had to come down here. First, thanks for giving me some time to talk. I wrote a few things down, but I just want to say, you know, the work you do and what we're talking about and the health and the lives of our citizens, that's not extreme. When I'm getting calls from people in communities that were upset last night, and it's not just my community, it's representatives and colleagues that I work with, people that know that live in the Mountain View area, that live in the South Valley. This impacts them. And as you all know, our air isn't in a bubble. It isn't in a wall. It's for all of us, right? And so whatever happens to one area, it happens to us all, and we should all care about that. And I just don't think this is the right thing to be doing. I'm really shocked that this is even happening here in Albuquerque. And I want to apologize for not speaking out earlier on this issue, because I didn't think it could happen. That being said, we have to continue to work together, county, city, state level, to work on this issue, no matter what happens from this ordinance and how long this meeting happens. And we can work together. And the way we work together is not by getting rid of a board, not by abolishing it, not by not liking what happens or the decisions that are made or the decisions that may happen. I think many of us, like myself, probably wouldn't have a job, the decisions we make in the legislature, right? But we wouldn't just change it. And I understand you're appointed, but I still believe you should have the same respect given to you. I really believe that. And I want to apologize. I was hearing earlier as well, the comments and the verbiage used and extremism and eco-extremists, we have to get rid of that stuff. To say that they don't see an issue with it or they don't disagree with it, these words have consequences to people and families, and we all know that. So if someone's not going to apologize, I'll apologize for it. Because as an elected official, I understand what I'm signing up for, but none of you deserve that. That being said, I'm just going to end it there. I know you got to get back to work, and I wrote something, but just know that I'm here and I want to get to work and see what we can do going forward, all right, to protect our communities, because that's what this is all about. I'll just end and say, what is a business? What is a community? What is an industry without the people? That's something that I learned in my service in the military. With all the weapon systems, the satellites, everything we had, it didn't mean a thing without the people. And that's what this should always be about. That should be our North Star in the decisions that we make. Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you.
Mr. Hearing Officer? Mr. Hearing Officer?
Yes, Mr.
I would like to make a motion that we recess. I don't think there's any cross-examination for that last panel, and I'm not sure there's any witnesses ready to go on at 7:30 or whenever we come back. And I don't think, I've checked with council, I don't think there's any objection.
Dr. O'Donnell is not available this evening, and she's our only remaining witness. So we do not object.
We also don't object. Our two witnesses are unavailable this evening, but are ready tomorrow.
Right. So I understand that there will be no further questions or examination of Manuel Criollo and Sofia Martinez. Is that right? If I don't hear anyone out there saying that there's any further examination, then their examination is complete. Okay. I suppose.
Is there anyone else signed up for public comments?
Can I take that at this time or after a break? All right. We're going to take a 30-minute break and then we can continue with public comment. So, all right.
Mr. Hearing Officer, what time will we start tomorrow?
I believe we're 8:30.
8:30. Thank you.